Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zhang, and today we'll be going over the ELA exam for Exam 1. This is for Form SWG. Right, so for the first section, what you have to do is each of the following questions consists of one word followed by 5 words or phrases. And you have to select one word or phrase whose meaning is closest to the word in capital letters. So for example, chili and choice D, cold. These are synonyms. So you want to pick the word with the closest meaning. So for question number 1, the word is bizarre. So bizarre is an adjective. When something is bizarre, that means that it's kind of weird, and it's kind of choice C, odd. So bizarre is an adjective, and it just means weird. Or strange. So something not normal. So for example, in a sentence, it can be in the summer, snowing is bizarre. So normally in the summer, you expect nice warm weather, and snowing is not normal. But this could happen in the summer if you're really high up in the mountains, for example. Next, for number 2, the word is preface. So preface here is a verb. So it's an action word. And what this means is kind of like to, before you see something, you want to preface it, and kind of choice A, introduce a concept. So the word pre, and this word pre means before. So often when we look at words, you have to look at the etymology or the prefixes, the suffixes, and root words. Here you see the prefix pre, which means before. So here it means to introduce. So when you preface something, you're kind of introducing a topic before you go into the topic. Essentially you're giving a preview of something. So oftentimes you see that in books as well. So, for example, the preface of this book includes the author's words and dedications. So oftentimes before you read a book, before you get into the book, the author would include a preface, which includes what the book is about, what the author thinks about the book. So, what the author inspirations were, who the author includes as a dedication. Again, this is just before you read the book, just some information before doing something. Next, for number 3, the word is generous. So generous means, we'll have a couple meanings as an adjective. It could mean really kind or nice, so someone who's not mean. But here, we don't see that. What generous could also mean is choice C, ample. It could also mean a secondary definition, have a lot of something. So, for example, at a diner, which is kind of like a restaurant, the portion sizes are generous. So what this means is if you go to this restaurant, this diner, the plates of food that they give you is a lot of food. They don't give you like 2 small pieces of bacon. They give you a whole lot of bacon, a whole lot of eggs, a lot of waffles and pancakes and everything. So they give you a really big meal for pretty low cost. So the portion sizes are generous, which means it doesn't mean that the meals are nice. It means that they are there's a lot of something. So in this case, it means ample. These are synonyms. Next, for number 4, the word here is moral. So moral in this case could mean, well, normally as an adjective, morality has to do with doing the right thing. So you're not breaking the law, you're doing something that should be done. Being a good person, for example. A good citizen. So that means, not littering, cleaning up after yourself, being respectful of people. So by being moral, you're doing all those things. And a synonym of that is choice D, being upright. So for example, often hear this as being an upright citizen. So she was a moral and upright citizen. She never litters and even picks up other people's trash. So she's a moral, an upright citizen, which means that she really cares about society. She's doing the right thing. She's not contributing to the litter. She's helping reduce the litter for other people. So that's what moral means, is doing the right thing. Next, for number 5, the word here is alter. So alter as a verb means to change. So that's choice E. When something's altered, it means it is changed. So for example, you can see in a sentence, I needed to alter my clothes so that they fit me better. So for example, if you got clothes and they're a different size that you didn't want, so what you can do is you can extend it or cut it a little bit so that it matches your height, your width, etc. So it matches your size. So you can alter or change the size a little bit. And you would have to go to a seamstress for that. So again, altered here means to change. Right, next, for number 6, the word here is revolve, and revolve is a verb here. And here, revolve, when you have a revolution, it means to go around. So this is going to be choice D. It's kind of like a revolving door. It just keeps spinning. So when you have a revolving door, it's one where there's a multiple panels. And it kind of spins when you're entering. So you would, stay here and you would push this way, and then that'll cause everything else to turn. So in a revolving door, it just spins around. And this is actually good because it saves electricity, because in the winter, for example, the hot air doesn't escape. So the hot air kind of remains sealed inside the building. And then also in the summer, the cold air, if you have the AC on, won't escape. So it's actually a really energy efficient way of entering and leaving, instead of just leaving the door open and letting all the hot air and cold air leave. So again, revolve here means to go around or to spin. So for example, in science, the Earth revolves around the sun every 365 days. That's called a year. Next, for number 7, the word is hopeful. So when you're hopeful, as an adjective, that means you are looking forward to the future positively. So you want good things to happen, good things will happen. So here, when someone's hopeful, it looks promising, which means that good things will happen. So I am hopeful that this new year will be even better than last year. So when you're hopeful, let's say, on December 31st, right before New Year's Day, 1/1, you want to be hopeful that the new year will be better than last year. So you're looking forward to the new year, to all the good things that will happen, to all the New Year's resolutions and the changes that you're going to make. So that's what hopeful means. Next, for number 8, the word here is linger. So something lingers. In this case, it's a verb. It means to stay behind. For example, it could be like smells that linger. So after cooking dinner, she noticed that the smell of whatever fish lingered in the kitchen. That could be a good or bad thing if you like or dislike the smell of fish. So here, the closest one would be choice C, to dawdle. So dawdle means, usually it refers to a person who's like lingering, not leaving. So you can also refer to people who linger behind. Just means to stay behind. So you could talk about people or smell, just something that doesn't leave. Next, for number 9, the word is assist. So if you want to assist someone, you are, choice E, helping them. To aid, to help someone in need. Example, he needed to assist me when moving the couch. So for example, the couch is really large and you can't have one person moving it, so you need 2 people, or at least 2 people to move it. So you can assist or help someone to move something. Finally, for number 10, the word here is construct. So the word construct, you can think of construction, and that means to build. So think of the word construction, and you can have, construction workers or workers are quickly constructing a new apartment building to house homeless people. So if there are homeless people, you want to quickly construct a new building, so then you can put them in home. You can help them. So here, construct means to build or to erect or to just build something. All right, and here is a summary for this first page. Next, we have a story here, and for this passage, you have to. There's a diagram, and there's a title, author, and it's also really helpful to actually preview the story with the questions first. So number 11 talks about the word chambers. So we're going to look for chambers. 12, we want to look for the sentence from paragraph 1. Choice or question 13 has paragraph 8. And then 14 talks about a woodchuck. And 15 as well as these woodchucks burrowing. So this is probably what the passage is about. So when you preview the questions, you can kind of focus on key parts of this passage. So let's read this one together. Paragraph 1 says, the woodchuck sits up on its hind legs, chewing a wild strawberry. Looking around, the chuck freezes when it spies a farmer's dog. The dog sniffs the air, spots the chuck, and charges towards it. The woodchuck watches the enemy coming closer and closer, and then poof, the woodchuck disappears from sight, and the dog's left puzzled. The woodchuck has dropped into its burrow to escape. You can see that here. A burrow is kind of like a hole in the ground. But it's not just a hole in the ground, it's a little more complicated than that. So paragraph 2 says, a woodchuck's burrow is more than just a hole in the ground. It's a complex system of entrances, tunnels, and rooms called chambers. We see that here. These are different chambers. Burrows give woodchucks a place to sleep, raise young, and escape enemies. When a woodchuck hibernates, or sleeps through the winter, it makes a simple burrow and plugs the entrance with sand. So here you can see this system of entrances. Here, a tunnel, and then rooms called chambers. So chambers just means rooms, so you could use context clues for that. And here you have rooms for sleeping, raising the young, that's nursing, and then escaping enemies, this turnaround chamber. Also, here you have this keyword hibernate, which is defined here. So when animals hibernate, they are sleeping through the winter mostly. So let's continue this passage. A woodchuck uses its strong claws to dig its own burrow. In soft soil, a woodchuck can dig an entire burrow in one day. Each summer, a burrow usually has several entrances, and this lets the woodchuck roam and still have a safe hole nearby in case danger comes along. For the side entrance, a woodchuck may choose the woods at the edge of a meadow. The hole must be hidden from view but close to food. The plunge hole has a special burrow entrance. It goes straight down 2 or more feet. When an enemy comes near, the woodchuck may give a shrill whistle and then drop straight down into the hole. This is how the woodchuck disappears from the dog's sight. Under the ground, tunnels and chamber connects the entrances. There's a sleeping chamber, a turnaround chamber, and a nursery chamber. A woodchuck burrow can even have a bathroom. A woodchuck may bury its waste in its chamber, and sometimes it will add waste to the mound of sand and then mark that main entrance. This mound lets other animals know whether or not a burrow is active, which means it's being used. Many animals look for empty woodchuck burrows, and why not? The burrows are warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and ready-made. Rabbits used empty burrows to avoid summer heat. They may even pop into an active burrow to escape an enemy. Skunks, weasels, and opossums use empty burrows as woodchucks do for sleeping, hiding, and raising their young. Foxes may take over active burrows to raise their own young in the warm dens. Now you can see that a burrow is more than just a hole in the ground. It's a perfect place for woodchucks or other animals to sleep, hide, and raise young. To woodchuck, there's no place like a burrow. Alright, so after reading this passage, you can answer the questions. So number 11 says, how should the word chambers be divided into syllable? So syllable is each part of the word. You can break this down into 2, chambers. So that's choice B. So it's 2 syllables here. Next for number 12, read the sentence from paragraph 1 of this passage. The woodchuck watches the enemy coming closer and closer, and then poof. In the sentence above, the author uses the word closer to show that the enemy is. So here, since it refers back to paragraph 1, let's go back to the text. And that part is over here. So what this is doing is this dog is coming closer and closer. So this woodchuck was seeing this dog, which is this enemy, approaching the woodchuck. Choice A. Approaching means to come closer. So this dog's coming too close, and the woodchuck is going to try to hide away because it's a threat. So that's what this means. Next for number 13, use this dictionary entry to answer the following question. So you have pop, which is a verb, to make a short, sharp sound, to move quickly, to open wide, or to let go of. Read the sentence from paragraph 8 of the passage. They may even pop into an active burrow to escape an enemy. Which dictionary entry gives the best meaning for the word pop as it is used in the sentence in the box? So you have 4 definitions for pop, and you have paragraph 8. So let's go back and refer to paragraph 8. Here it's they, refers to rabbits. The rabbits here. May even pop into a burrow to escape an enemy. So when you're popping into a burrow, that means that you're going into. So you're quickly going into this burrow. So if a rabbit's trying to escape from a fox, it's going to hop in or pop in to a burrow just temporarily. So here it means choice B, to move quickly. So you're just popping in and out. That means you're quickly going in and quickly going out. So that's choice B. Next for number 14, a woodchuck finds a food source above the outer part of its burrow. What is a woodchuck most likely to do? So we want to look for food source. So if we go back to the text, you can see that there is a part that talks about food, and that is over here in paragraph 5. For the main entrance, a chuck may choose woods and must be hidden from view but close to food. So if it's kind of close to food, then we'll make a main entrance for the hole. So here it's probably going to dig another entrance. Again, this is paragraph 5. Next for number 15, which sentence best tells how the woodchuck lives through the winter? So when we talk about the keyword here, winter, you see that over here, this hibernation part in paragraph 2. So it sleeps through the winter in the simple burrow and plugs the entrance with sand, so it kind of buries itself in. So here, the woodchuck will be hibernating. It's going to make a simple burrow and unplug the entrance with sand. That's paragraph 2. So always go back to the text, look for these keywords, and choose the best choice. Next to number 16, why would a woodchuck make a burrow with several entrances? So here we have several entrances here. If you look at the different entrances, so you have a main entrance, you also have other entrances here, and each summer the burrow usually has several entrances. This lets the woodchuck roam and to have a safe hole nearby in case danger comes along. So this is so that they can escape an enemy. So here, that's paragraph 4 for question number 16. Yes, paragraph 4. So you can escape danger quickly. So if there's one entrance, you can then pop out a different entrance. So here's a summary for these 2 pages. All right, next you have a passage about Matthew Henson, which is an Arctic, or who was and Arctic explorer. So again, really good strategy, especially for a time test, is to go, before you read the passage, is to preview the questions first. So paragraph 3, something you want to focus on. So I'm going to denote that. Then you have this phrase, taken their toll. So we're going to look out for taking your toll. And in paragraph 1, also important, so I'm going to highlight that, the purpose of paragraph 1. So this is how we can annotate or mark up this text. Next, for number 20, under trip at the North Pole, they could best be compared to. So focus on North Pole. This is a non-efficient passage, so what's the point of it? And then how is this information organized? So how did the author present this information? And how much time elapsed? So that's something to keep in mind. So let's go back to the text, and then we can do a close read. So this passage starts with paragraph 1. In 1880, 14-year-old Matthew Henson loved to hear sailors tell tales about their exciting lives at sea. The travel, the adventure, the danger, and the steady pay were all appealing to young Henson. One day he made up his mind. Baltimore was the nearest large seaport. The next morning, he set out on the 40-mile journey to seek work on a sailing ship. So one of the questions has to do with purpose, which is like, what's the point of this paragraph? And this first paragraph is an introduction. And kind of explains why Henson chose his life on the sea, essentially. So it kind of explains as an introduction, who is he? He's 14 years old. Why did he want to do this? Well, he heard sailors talking about their tales at the sea. And then what did he do? Well, he went to Baltimore, and then he joined a sailing ship. So it kind of explains the purpose or why he did these things. So next in paragraph 2 talks about in Baltimore, Henson found a job as a cabin boy on a beautiful ship called the Katy Hines. For the next 5 years, Henson sailed around the world. With the help of the ship's captain and other members of the crew, Henson learned mathematics, navigation, history, geography, and many other subjects. By the time he left the Katy Hines in 1885, Henson was well educated and had become an excellent seaman. So again, this is his kind of like school, because obviously it wasn't an actual school on a ship. So you have other people teaching him all these subjects: math, navigation, so like how to go around on the sea, history, geography, and all those important subjects for shipping. And you also need a purpose of paragraph 3 in one of the questions. So paragraph 3 says, unable to find work anywhere else, Henson took a job at a hat shop in Washington, D.C. One day in 1887, a man came in to buy a hat. The man, Lieutenant Robert Peary, asked the owner if he knew anyone with experience at sea. Peary would soon travel to South America for the U.S. government. He needed an experienced man to accompany him. So here, this is sort of like a transition point in this story. So unfortunately, he couldn't find a job. So probably because he was looking in a different field and maybe he didn't have a formal education. He was well educated here, but he didn't have a diploma or a degree from a college or from even a high school. So that might have been difficult for him to find a job. But by luck, you have a lieutenant, and this is a lieutenant, is a rank in the military, or in this case it's the Navy. And it's a pretty high-ranking member of the Navy in this case, and he needed people who knew how to travel at sea to go with him on an expedition to South America. So paragraph 4, the shop owner knew about his young employee's skills and experience on ocean voyages, so he introduced Peary to Henson. Henson and Peary liked each other instantly. They had a great deal in common, including their love for the sea. So this is kind of the transition, the beginning of a new journey. You kind of see that here. There's a turning point. Next, in paragraph 5, using his map reading and sailing skills, Henson proved himself to be a worthy and intelligent seaman. Peary soon made Henson his assistant, and they became close friends. One day, Peary told Henson about his real dream, to be the first man to stand on top of the world at the North Pole. He asked Henson to help him make his dream come true. So, of course, on top of the world is kind of in quotations. It's not literally on top of the world, because, of course, Earth is a sphere. But the North Pole here is kind of like near the top. Next, for paragraph 6, over the next 5 years, 2 explorers made 2 trips together to the Arctic. However, they were not able to reach the pole either time. The cold, the wind, the ice were worse than either of them had ever imagined. On each trip, though, Henson learned something new about traveling in frozen polar regions. So polar here means it refers to the poles, to the North and the South Pole. Next, for paragraph 7, in 1908, Peary and Henson were ready to make their final attempt at reaching the North Pole. Both men were over 40 years old. The years of hardship and suffering in the Arctic cold had taken their toll on both men. This would be their last chance. So when something takes their toll, it means it's really hard on their bodies. So what this means, it's really cold, and it's hard to recover from that because it's an extreme weather condition. So if something takes its toll on you, that means it's really beating you down. It's wearing you out. You're really tired after that. Next, for paragraph 8, with 4 Inuit guys, they made a mad dash straight across the ice towards the pole. Peary's feet were so frostbitten that it had to be pulled on a dog sled. In April 1909, Henson's instruments showed they were standing at the North Pole. Together, Henson and Peary planted the American flag in the snow. You hear this is their resolution, kind of. So this is their success of the journey. They had Inuit guys, and these are natives who live near the North Pole in Canada and Alaska, and suffer from frostbite. It's what happens when things are so cold that your body just starts to shut down. So in this case, it's feet. Oftentimes, if you have frostbite, they can literally just fall off and you can get amputated. Feet were harmed due to the cold. And then finally, on paragraph 9, in later years, Robert Peary and Henson were greatly honored for their accomplishment. Today, the 2 friends and fellow explorers lie in a hero's grave not far apart in the Arlington National Cemetery. And this is a cemetery for important people near Washington, D.C. All right, so in this passage, you have sort of the beginning, this career of Matthew Henson, this Arctic explorer, why he wanted to go to the sea, and how his life kind of changed in a chop, just kind of by chance in DC. And then sort of the problem, and then you have the solution here. So you have a problem, there's an uphill battle, this hill that you have to conquer, and then you can resolve it over here. All right, so we can now go through the questions. Question 17 says, why did the author include paragraph 3 in the passage? So paragraph 3 is over here, and we annotated this passage. This paragraph was a kind of a transition. It's the start of a new journey for Henson. So here kind of shows how Matthew Henson met Robert Peary. And essentially, this is that transition, this new journey. Met someone new. It's going to take him on a journey to South America. Question 18, read the following sentence. The years of hardship and suffering, the Arctic had taken their toll on both men. So again, we looked at that phrase more closely. The phrase taken a toll means that the years Peary and Henson spent exploring the Arctic had. So over here, when you take their toll, this is in paragraph 7, it's really hard on their bodies and it weakened them. So that's going to be choice C. means to weaken, to be really challenging. So it didn't help them, it didn't satisfy them or enlighten them. Enlighten means like made them like smarter and more aware. So this is the opposite. It made them really weak because it hurts. Next for question 19, in paragraph 1, the author shows how Henson became. So over here, paragraph 1, sort of the introduction, and it explains why Henson chose his life. Okay, he heard sailors telling about their lives at sea. There was traveling, adventure, danger, and steady pay. So money was all appealing. So it's kind of like the why. An emphasis on why Henson chose this life. And that goes with choice D. It's why Henson was interested / wanted to explore. On the sea or on land, so explore. Next for number 20, on their trip to the North Pole, Matthew Henson and Robert Peary could best be compared to. So when they went to the North Pole, that is here chapter 6, 7, and 8. So they were working together, they had hardship and suffering, and eventually they succeeded. So what they were kind of like, if you go through all the choices, were they like knights on a quest? Were they like treasure hunters? Were they like soldiers going to war? Or were they princes seeking power over another country? So we can kind of eliminate some choices. They weren't seeking power. They were just being determined to kind of go somewhere, to be kind of the first people there. So they weren't looking for money, and they weren't saving their freedom. They were like knights on a quest in a foreign land. This quest to reach the North Pole, and none of them have been there, so they kept trying. So they weren't looking for money or freedom or anything. They were just on a personal quest to be the first people to explore the North Pole. So it's going to be choice A. Next for 21, in this nonfiction passage, the author mainly, so this is the author's purpose. So for these author's purpose questions, you have to think about the passage as a whole and think about, why did the author write this passage? What did this author do? And think about the big picture. Look at the title. It's about Matthew Henson. Everything, this whole passage talks about this one man's life, and that's going to be choice D. It tells an interesting life. It doesn't focus. The author did describe, the Arctic and, talk about harsh weather and talk about exploring, but this wasn't the main idea. These were supporting details. These were all supporting details on this person's life. So it talks about the interesting life of Henson from his childhood to his end, when he reached the Arctic, and also where he's buried. So that's the author's purpose. For these questions, you have to think about the passage as a whole and think about why the author writes this piece. Next for number 22, the information presented in this passage is mainly organized. So think about how this passage is organized. If you look at it, here at the beginning is his young life. Then it's his 20s, this hat shop. And then the next 5 years, they're exploring the Arctic. And then it's where they pass away, and then they are buried in the Arlington National Cemetery. So what that is, it's in chronological order. Chronological means time order. So the beginning, the middle, the end just goes forward in time. You have, his teenage years, and then his mid-20s, and then the 40s, and then death. To talk about his entire life in chronological order. Next, for number 23, approximately how much time elapses in this passage? So again, it's choice D, it's one lifetime, because it talks about the life of Henson from his childhood to his death. So just one lifetime. It's not exactly 10 years or 100 years. We don't really know when he died. It just says in later years. So just one lifetime here. And here's a summary for this page. Next, we have this short poem. And again, kind of preview the questions here. So, treetops deploy. So, gotta look for the word deploy. And then all the scene is troubled. It talks about a swan. And then the poet looking for tone. The tone's kind of like how she's presenting this information. And then how does the poet create a sense of activity? So activity means like motion, just like action. And then what is the purpose of metaphors used throughout the poem? And that's really important. Metaphors are comparisons, but without like or as. So they're not similes, they're a little trickier. So you don't have like or as, and when you're comparing two things. So poems are generally tricky because they're not that wordy, so it's the benefit. It's not that many words. But the downside is there are a lot of metaphors, a lot of hidden meanings, and you have to really read closely to analyze what the author is trying to say. The author won't just say it, or the poet rather won't just say it. You have to really think about what the poet's trying to say. So here's it's called Water Picture by Mae Swenson. So in the pond in the park, all things are doubled. Long buildings hang and wriggle gently. Chimneys are bent legs, bouncing on clouds below. A flag wags like a fishhook down there in the sky. The arched stone bridge is an eye with underlid in the water. In its lens dip crinkled heads with hats that don't fall off. Dogs go by, barking on their backs. A baby taken to feed the ducks dangles upside down, a pink balloon for a buoy. Treetops deploy a haze of cherry bloom for roots, where birds coast belly up in the glass bowl of hill. From its bottom, a bunch of peanut-munching children is suspended by their sneakers, waveringly. A swan with twin necks formed the figure 3, steers between two dimpled towers doubled. Fondly hissing, she kisses herself, and all the scene is troubled. Water windows splinter, tree limbs tangle, and the bridge folds like a fan. So you're talking about here the water picture, and here look at the big picture here. So what's happening is you have reflections in the water. So all of these are examples when you have, water, and then you have, let's say, here this bridge, the stone bridge that looks like. It looks like this. You have a bridge full of stone. Well, in the water, it's kind of like a reflected image, and it looks kind of like that eye. So this is where you're talking about this eye with this underlid in the water and its lens. So it kind of looks like an eye here. Think of it as a giant eyeball. But essentially is what's happening when things are doubled. It's their reflection. So everything's just upside down. So when you have reflections, you have things that are essentially upside down. So from question 24, read these lines from the poem. The treetops deploy a haze of cherry blossoms for roots. So the word deploy, if you look at deploy here, means to release. So deploy means to release, or choice A, to spread. So what's happening here is when you have trees and they're deploying cherry blooms. So when things are spreading out, you have cherry blooms, flowers. In the water, things look upside down. So when the wind blows leaves, they're kind of spreading out. And then they're deploying all these leaves, and they're reflected in the water. So that's what this is saying. The cherry blooms look like roots now because they're reflected. All right, next for 25, read this line from the poem. And all the scene is troubled. This line refers to the fact that the swan, so here, something happens with this delicate reflection. The swan, which looks like this with the wings, there's the head and whatever. So in the water, the swan essentially looks reflected. And this is that figure 3. In this case, it's like backwards. But essentially what's happening is the swan kissing herself, which means the swan is dipping its head in the water, and then the reflection kind of meet right there. And then what happens is when you dip in the water, you create ripples. So that's what this troubled refers to. These are ripples in the water. So when you disturb water, it creates these ripples, these little waves that then disrupt this image. So the water windows splinter, which means they split. The bridge folds. The limbs tangle. They get messed up because that reflection got rippled, and you can't really see the reflection perfectly anymore. So here, the scene is troubled refers to the fact that the swan has disturbed the still water, and it ruins the reflections. So that's the imagery that the author is trying to use here. Next, for number 26, how does the poet achieve her tone? So her tone is how she is conveying the information. So how is she presenting the information? She's trying to sets a poem in a public park. Is she describing familiar things in a surprising way? Is she using lines of varying length? Or is she contrasting the swan with other birds? So she definitely doesn't do that. That's not the focus here. Her tone's like the overall thing. She does set the poem in a park, but this doesn't tell you about the tone. So that's not it. That's just about the setting. And she uses lines of varying lengths. So again, here, some of them are longer, some of them are shorter, but it's not, again, her tone. Her tone is choice B. What she's doing is she's being descriptive, in presenting just normal everyday things, just a reflection in the water in a interesting or unique way. So she's just talking about the reflections in the water, but she's making it sound way cooler than it actually is, because obviously you can just see, go to the park, look at a pond, and just see a reflection and think nothing of it. But what she's doing is she's really expanding and wondering about all these different cool things that is happening. Trees with reflection as limbs, this swan that's kissing itself. You have this bridge that looks like an eye. You have all these interesting things that are kind of happening in this reflection, this mirror world. That's where 26, the big picture. This is her tone. Next, for 27, how does the poet create a sense of activity in this poem? So activity is like action. So here, again, to think about this action here, because really what's happening is she's describing just a reflection. Not much is happening. Okay, trees are fluttering in the wind. The swan is, just dipping its head into the water. But what she's doing is she's using strong descriptive words to elicit this idea of action. Lots of things are happening. It's not introducing characters here. She does compare the bridge to the eye, but that's not action. It's true, but it's not action. Just a description. And the line being fairly short, it's not really something to do with it. She uses strong, really descriptive words to introduce action. For example, she has fondly hissing and kissing itself, and then the scene is troubled, things splinter, tangle, and folds like a fan. So these are really descriptive words here, especially this section, to show that this peaceful water is now being disrupted. So next to 28, what's the purpose of metaphors used throughout the poem? So when you have metaphors, the reason why we're doing comparisons is so that we can help the reader visualize certain ideas. So here, you're trying to visualize, kind of imagine these objects and their reflections in the water. So in your head, you can kind of imagine, these trees being reflected, this bridge looking like an eye, or the swan that looks like a figure 3. So you have all these different metaphors. Twin necks forming the figure 3, this bridge being an eye. Again, this stone bridge is an eye, that's a metaphor. Comparing it to an eye, but no like or as. You have the swan, figure 3. You even have flag, wags, or this one would be a simile because you use the word like. But still a comparison nonetheless. So again, it's to help you visualize these things, and I did try to draw them as best as I could. So that's the summary for this section. So just be careful with poems, because when you have poems, there are a lot of metaphors and a lot of hidden meanings here. Next, you have a short passage. So here you have main idea, and then here which is not true of NASA, and here the attitude when describing space exploration. So that's what this is about. And then you have NASA space shuttle program and the word reach in line 7. So let's find that first, and you can underline that. So it's a pretty short passage. So in 2011, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, ended the space shuttle program, which was a U.S. manned space flight program after the Apollo program took astronauts to the moon. NASA's space shuttle program used 5 shuttles in its 30-year program: Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Endeavour, and Atlantis. All carried astronauts and cargo into space. Shuttles were used to build the International Space Station, known as ISS, and deploy the Hubble telescope. The ISS orbits the Earth and is crewed by astronauts from all over the world. Currently, astronauts reach the station on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. Today, NASA is working to design and build spacecraft for exploration further into space so humans can return to the moon, explore Mars, or even visit an asteroid. NASA has sent robotics labs to Mars, the moon, and beyond. NASA is also working in partnership with private companies to develop a commercial space industry to supply ISS and carry out experiments in low orbit space, or low Earth orbit. Companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin are working to develop rockets that can take satellites, cargo, and eventually humans into outer space, which they've done. SpaceX has already successfully launched missions to the International Space Station and launched satellites and experiments into orbit on a rocket called Falcon 9. In the same way, the Space Shuttle program made space travel easier and less expensive by reusing the shuttles many times. SpaceX is able to launch frequently by reusing its rockets and boosters. The commercial spaceflight industry has many exciting possibilities for scientific discovery, both in creating faster travel on Earth and traveling beyond our planet to explore the solar system. So one thing to keep in mind here is this concept of commercial. And we have commercial, that means for profit, like a company. So that's what like commercials are. They're from a company and they're trying to sell you something for profit to make money. So that's this concept, to make it commercial. For 29, which of the best summarizes the main point? So here, this paragraph as a whole, or this passage as a whole, is about how NASA stopped and how it's actually continuing this space program. So that's going to be choice E. It's still possible for the U.S. to make scientific advancements without NASA's space program, because you can use private companies or private partnerships. And we see that here in this last paragraph. This last paragraph summarizes the entire passage. Next, for number 30. So according to the passage, which of the following is not true of NASA? So you have to go through all the choices and see which one is not true. So A says NASA collaborates with private companies such as ISS. So here it does collaborate with private companies, but the International Space Station is not a private company. So here we have private companies such as SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing, and Lockheed Martin. But the International Space Station is actually built by ISS, built by NASA here. So here it's probably going to be choice A. So it's not a private company. But you should still go through all the choices just to make sure everything else is correct. So B says the space shuttle program terminated or just ended after 30 years. So we can see that is true. We go back to here. After 30 years, these shuttles stopped. And it's a 30-year program. So that is line 3. Choice C says NASA has plans for man to return to outer space. So it talks about that here. Humans can return to the moon. So this is line 9. Then choice D talks about Columbia, Challenger, Discovery, Endeavour, and Atlantis, comprising the shuttle fleet. And these you see on line 4. These are the 5 space shuttles that carry cargo into space. And prior to 2011, NASA sent manned missions into space. And yes, that is true. They went to the moon. So again, it says return to the moon. So that was from before, so that's also line 9. So here the correct answer is A. Private companies are listed in line 12, and the International Space Station is not a private company. So 30 is choice A. Next, for number 31, the author's attitude when discussing space travel or space exploration is best described as. So here, when you have a author's attitude or the tone or basically the author's voice, you have to think about this passage as a whole and think, well, whether or not the author feels positive or negative about it. So here we can see that the author ends with something that is looking forward to the future. So it's like excited. The author wants this to happen. Again, these exciting possibilities. So when something's exciting, synonym for that is jubilant. So they're happy and they want this to happen. The author is jubilant here. Next, for number 32, it can most likely be inferred from the passage that when NASA ended the space shuttle program. So again, when you have an inference, you have to read between the lines here. So think about what the author was referring to. So I had to go through all the choices. A says the US lost momentum in future space discoveries. That's not true because you have all these private companies taking over. Choice B says numerous men and women lost their jobs and dreams of space travel. That could be true, so we can put this as maybe. A is no because you have private companies who kind of took over. C says NASA also retired their 5 shuttles from manned spaceflight. Also probably true because you can't use them anymore. D says the US has more money and resources to allocate towards privately operated space missions. Again, it's probably true, but it's not stated explicitly. So this may or may not be true. So we don't know that. And E says NASA turned to rockets and boosters for future manned space missions. Again, that's not true. We have no indication of that. So here, between choices B and C, the best answer here is going to be choice C, because you have 5 shuttles to get to space, and then you ended it, so then these 5 shuttles aren't used anymore. That's probably the most likely conclusion. The other ones could be true, but we don't know that. C is the best one here. So again, when you have an inference question, you have to read between the lines and make an educated guess based off of the information that is stated. Finally, for number 33, the word reach in line 7 could be replaced by which of the following without changing the author's meaning. So I go back to line 7. Currently, astronauts reach the station on the Russian Soyuz spacecraft. So when you reach the station, you are arriving at the station. It's choice C. In this case, when you reach the station, you're arriving at the station. So you're like going there, like when you reached your destination. That's like you're arriving at your destination. All right, so here's a summary for this last page. Thank you everyone for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys at the next one. All right, bye everyone.